Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to our episode on celebrating the 1-year birthday of the Mindful Healers podcast. A reminder that our podcast is not medical advice.
Our intention of today is to celebrate, first and foremost, and to share reflections on our journey of podcasting together for a year and what we've learned. We hope you'll discover that taking the opportunity to share your pride in an accomplishment and what's possible with others is fun and inspiring. And that sometimes, even though the pride in sharing is uncomfortable, it's growth and can be fun.
The takeaways that we hope that you'll have are recognizing that celebrations are supposed to be fun and that this might actually be hard, like having fun for many high achievers, and to enjoy your success, that it's okay to enjoy your success, which is also hard for many people. That being in the moment of achievement is uncomfortable for many, but you should do it anyway.
So in this episode, we are going to have fun. We are going to practice enjoying our success, and we're going to share what we've learned and hopefully inspire you to go on a life journey that brings you joy, helps you grow, and also inspires others. We wanted to start with a celebration of the sounds of the Mindful Healers podcast and a celebration of the singing bowl that many of our regular listeners have come to know and enjoy. One of our reviewers likened it to a Pavlovian sound, that when they hear the singing bowl, they immediately feel relaxed. And so for those of you that are newer listeners and haven't listened to one of the very first episodes, I wanted to share as a 1-year reflection the story of the singing bowl, which is that this is not just any singing bowl. I like to think of it as a magic singing bowl. It is a bowl that I share in weekly yoga, almost weekly, and many have come to know it there. But it came to me as a gift from my husband, who bought it in a shop on the Haight, Ashbury in San Francisco, which is a place in and of itself to go and experience. And he bought it for me as a 48th, 49th, I'm not sure, birthday present, the year I was beginning my yoga teacher training. And I began my yoga teacher training in August, and this gift came a couple weeks before that. And this bowl has been on this journey with us, beginning and ending every Mindful Healers podcast episode. And so we wanted to take a moment and acknowledge the bowl in a little bit of a more lighthearted way than perhaps the usual playing of the bowl, realizing that there are lots of ways to enjoy singing bowls and mindful sounds. So here's a moment of ode to the bowl.
Love it, Jessie. The way that you play that bowl reminds me of some Chinese New Year celebrations. So it was played in a very celebratory way.
Why, thank you. A little different than my usual. So today we wanted to start with reflections on our journey as podcasters. And that sounds actually quite funny to say, but I do realize now that I think we're on episode 54 that it has been a journey, a year-long journey together. And to start sharing what we have learned from the process. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So even though I am usually a little anxious during public speaking, podcasting has turned out to be a lot of fun. So that is one of the things that I've learned is that even though I have engaged in something that is usually uncomfortable for me, it's turned out to be a really fun journey and process.
So what I learned is that it's more fun to do it together, and that having a partner and a collaborator, and when the brainstorming fun idea comes, having someone to share it with, that makes the journey much more fun and much more inspiring. And when I think about sort of batteries and what energizes me, that makes the process energizing and something that adds to my life rather than something that's a to do. The other thing that I have not so much learned, but come to appreciate through the process is that I love creating and brainstorming and coming up with ideas. And I even love coming up with the ideas for the podcast that we haven't recorded yet. We have a whole file of, potential future episodes. And when I go in there, it's fun to look at it and fun to see that pile of like potential and opportunity. And even if we never record half of them, it was still fun to create and think and explore. So the next reflection we thought we would share is what was most surprising about our first year of podcasting.
For me, it was that this podcast probably would not have happened when it did had it not been for the COVID pandemic. So definitely for me, this podcast has been a huge silver lining of COVID.
So many things would not have happened were it not for COVID. And I think we so often tap into the frustration or what we've lost, but there's probably equal gain. And I have a client who shared with me once this quote that gifts come in funny packages. And your comment just reminds me of that. So it would be a gift that came out of COVID, an unexpected gift. So for me, what was most surprising is the impact that the podcast has had. I did expect people to listen, or I hoped that they would listen, but the feedback that I get about what people get from listening and the pieces of the podcast or the things that either you or I said that were really meaningful and changed their lives and changed their approach, or that really resonated, is what surprised me. And the other thing that surprised me is that it's become really a key part of my coaching that I offer to people in my coaching business, because my clients all listen regularly and they bring it up regularly in their sessions as something that helps them move through something, or, they'd heard me say it, but hearing me say it in a different setting. Or I have one client that re-listens to podcasts while she drives, and then all of a sudden there's this epiphany that comes out of it. So people talk about how you're in their head. Either I'm in their head as a yoga teacher or as a coach, and now I'm also in their head as a podcaster. But that was not something that I ever thought of as, I thought of it as sort of a different way to share the message, and perhaps to share the message with different people. And I think that I didn't necessarily think about the impact that it was potentially going to have.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the people that you work with in your coaching business have referenced the podcast, because in my postgraduate group of women physicians that I work with who have taken mindfulness-based stress reduction or the Mindful Physician CME course, they also reference it too. Like, it's part of their curriculum, but even though it's technically not a formal part of their curriculum, they adopt it as such, and they quote it during the sessions too. So I'm glad that it's become a repository for education in some of this important and difficult work.
And funny, our next question was what was most fun? But as you say that, that is fun to me to hear that, and to hear about that is not just surprising, but it's also fun. So what's most fun for you about podcasting?
I've had the most fun leading the mindful moments. I love guiding meditations, and I think our podcast is unique in that we offer a guided meditation at the end of every podcast. And I've really enjoyed doing more of what it is that I love, which is to lead guided meditations.
And I think it's actually worth mentioning, because I know many people listen to podcasts on the go, and perhaps when we get to the end and they hear the singing bowl, they don't stay on for the mindful moment, or they can't do it because they're driving. And I just want to call out that those are there as a resource for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And you can always go back and listen to the last 5 or 10 minutes of the episode. I noticed that my mindful moments are longer than Ni Chang's, but we try to alternate. So there's lots of different opportunities for experiencing those mindful moments. And they're our gift to you. And I hope that all of our listeners know that they're there and do. We always say stay on after the singing bowl for a mindful moment. But I also know that life is busy. And so I just want to remind people that they are there, and it's a place that you can always go back to and take advantage of them. So what is most fun for me, or what has been most fun, particularly recently, aside from the partnership, which I already mentioned, and I feel like I need to call out again, is our recent conversations, the episodes where we've had conversations and bringing people on that I maybe knew somewhat, but didn't know well, or I knew a little bit about them. And so having these just back and forth conversations about topics of interest have opened my mind and allowed me to learn about some new things, and just inspired some new thoughts and opened my mind in different ways. And that has been fun. Particularly for me, the play episode was just fun to think about play, and fun to think about how we can bring it into our lives and kids' lives. I think as a pediatrician and a mom, play is something that's near and dear to my heart. So that has been really fun. And also the chance to ask someone like Kristen Neff my questions about self-compassion. That was really fun. So how about the hardest part of the podcasting this year? What has been hard for you? Or I think I want to change the word to challenging, because hard for me is a word. I words are important, as you all know from listening to me, and hard just has an edge to it. But like, what's been the most challenging about being a podcaster for you?
I think deciding how much to share about my own experience and my own story. Letting go a little bit of the judgment that others are going to have on what I share. Definitely, it's been a balance for me, and it's been in a zone of challenge and therefore growth for me. It's an ongoing process in terms of like how much I'm comfortable sharing versus how much I actually do share. And then also the kind of added, if I don't share enough, then it's not going to be as strong of a message type of thought that I have. So it's a constant process for me. And I think it even depends day to day how much I feel like sharing. So that's been one of the hardest parts for me.
Yeah, it taps back into that idea of service too, that your sharing is of service or as a gift to others so they can learn, but how much of yourself is the right amount to give. I think that's a lifelong struggle for so many of us.
It translates to even just the practice of medicine too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's definitely tied into that.
And then the other thing that pops to mind there is this idea of vulnerability. And we know that being vulnerable helps others, and it's important to be vulnerable. And really, the world is more colorful and alive when we are vulnerable. But how much is the right amount to be vulnerable? It reminds me of a phrase, elegant vulnerability, and sharing just the right amount is the elegant way to do it. And then sometimes it's too much vulnerability, and sometimes it's not enough, so the message isn't clear, and that it's really a practice and an exploration. And we don't always get it right. And can we have compassion and kindness towards ourselves as we play with it? And learn from our experiences. So for me, the hardest part is actually sitting down to record. I love the brainstorming part, and you're going to laugh, right? I love the brainstorming part. And I'm always, as you know, sending you messages. We should do a podcast episode on this and doing that. And I actually love sort of thinking about what I want to share. But then the actual sitting down to record and making it happen, it's a little bit like exercise, where it feels great once I do it. I'm always happy I did it, and I grow and I enjoy it. And I love listening to podcasts, and I like the whole process. But for whatever reason, it's that like activation energy to sit down and press the record button is challenging for me. I don't know if you knew that.
No, that's news to me. To know that inertia is very strong when it comes to nailing down a time to record and actually doing it. But that's kind of funny that you're like.
Well, when I thought about it, that is the hardest thing for me, honestly. And again, I don't wish I did it. It's literally like exercise. And I do hear from people who are thinking about starting podcasts. And I know it's a thing these days. And, how do you do it, and the consistency? And we don't really batch record. Like, we're very much intuitive. It's we've got some things to share. Let's do it. And I just think as I started to think about it, I now have new insight into it. So I think sometimes asking yourself questions is really helpful. I'm like, that is the hardest part for me. And now that I'm acknowledging that, I think it's going to be easier to be like, oh yeah, that's not my favorite part. It's not that it's just the inertia to start. It's not my favorite part.
I think you nailed it on the head. We are intuitive recorders. Like, we don't really say, okay, we're going to do 8 episodes today. It's more about like, what are we in the mood for? And that's where a lot of our topics and the order in which they become released, it is truly a reflection of what's kind of been going on in both of our lives and what we feel inspired to record and share.
And to me, that's one of the things that makes this podcast different and special, is that there isn't sort of a lineup. We don't have a curriculum or an agenda. It's very much coming from the heart-centered, and wanting to gift out to the universe, what feels most relevant and powerful. And that's what makes it fun for me also.
I think this podcast is life-centered and heart-centered.
That feels good. So we wanted to do the hard part for us. I'll use the word hard, and maybe it's not hard, but the part just to share our successes and take some pride in them and own them. And so I looked up this morning, and as of today, when we are recording this, it's December 21st, we have over 17,500 downloads in our first 52 episodes. So I am proud of that. That's a lot of downloads and a lot of listens. And I want to just take a moment to own that. And it actually has kind of a tingly feeling as I share it, probably partly because I'm not used to sharing the successful things, but also that's a lot of downloads. I don't even know what that means, to be totally honest. Does it mean, can people listen without downloading? I actually have no idea, but it's a lot, and that it feels really beautiful. And I'm grateful that so many people have taken time to listen.
And that it's an exercise for us to even announce that.
Yeah.
There is some discomfort with sharing successes, and I just want to take a moment and acknowledge that and to own it.
Yeah. And so the next thing I wanted to share, because I think it would be of interest, especially to newer listeners who maybe haven't had a chance to go back to old episodes, is to share what our most popular episodes are. But because I am the one with the Libsyn account where things get loaded on, I wanted to ask, just as sort of a fun game, to see if you have any thoughts on what you think the most popular episodes are. And then I'll share a few of what they are.
I think definitely most recently the self-compassion episodes. I've been very purposeful also about injecting the Mindful Healthcare Collective with self-compassion kind of during the holiday season. So definitely the episodes with Dr. Stephen Hickman and Dr. Kristen Neff. And then also just because I know this from prior conversations I've had with you that are our stories and also our origin stories of how we met. And then the rest, I don't know.
So you're absolutely right. The self-compassion episodes with Kristen Neff and Steve Hickman. I will say Steve's episode has a lot higher numbers, but that's likely because it's just been out there longer. And so, I often hesitate to kind of look at the numbers and I judge like, oh, why do they like this episode more than that episode? And I'm sure there's lots of rhyme or reason to it that we don't know and understand, and some of it's timing and other things. But absolutely the Kristen Neff and Steve Hickman episodes. And I think that the topic of self-compassion really resonates with people. So even without those big name guests, which were certainly fun to share with our listeners, the idea of self-compassion very much resonates with people. And in my experience, people struggle with it as well. But it's interesting that we did an episode perhaps on kindness, which is a component of self-compassion, and it doesn't attract as many listeners. And so I just think that's an interesting way of thinking about it. And 100% our stories are the most popular. And that is episode 2 and 3 for people who've not listened to those. And I think that just reflects the idea that people want to know about people's lives and their personal stories and why they're here and why we're doing this. And I think along the way, we try to share bits and pieces of stories, but that this is also, common, universal to want to hear people's stories and share stories. So the other two, I put the others in categories. The parenting episodes are really popular, all of them. And so when parenting is a lot, parenting with presence instead of worry, how to be a better mom is quite popular. And so in all of those episodes, we really talk about infusing mindfulness and compassion and intention into parenting, and they are quite popular. The other one that's really popular is mindful minimalism. So a lot of people wanting to simplify and lighten their loads and doing that in a mindful and intentional way. And then unbecoming is the other one. And that I know is a favorite episode of mine because it was so personal. And I think it was personal for both of us. And the topic really resonates with many, many people. So any of those surprise you?
No, not really. Because I feel like out of the 52 episodes we've recorded, those are the ones that I would get the most out of as well, had I not been a co-host.
Beautiful. And so I'm curious what your favorite episode is.
So I'm going to have two. Definitely Kristen Neff's episode. I thought that what she shared was so refreshingly honest and open. Even though we have written works from her, her sharing her story about how she got into self-compassion in the first place and some of the examples that were so poignant, just refreshingly honest and raw. So that was really, really powerful. And then also the episode on sharing my story, because that was both a zone of challenge and growth for me, and yet it was kind of a opportunity for me to grow into my own on the fly.
Yeah. And I think that's the one you're most proud of too, right? Your story.
Yes.
Yeah. So my favorite episode, and I wonder if some of it is recency bias, but I really enjoyed the play episode. I just had fun with it. And it like popped different new ideas into my head that I really hadn't been thinking of. And it has made me really think about how to bring play into my life. And so it's had a really direct, like maybe it's short-term impact, but we recorded a few weeks ago. So I've had almost a month of thinking about play and it's really impacted my life. So I enjoy that. Another favorite episode is the Nourish episode I recorded with Ann Kennard. And one, because it celebrates our sort of friendship and collaboration on the Nourish and Transform retreats. Two, because this idea of how to nourish ourselves and really thinking about it like in all the ways just feels delicious and loving and wonderful. And I think there were so many sort of inspired out of the box ways to think about health and living better, which is one of my passions. And then the other reason why I love it is because Anne in that episode is so very Anne. And so the sound quality, you may notice, is not perfect because she's outside recording next to her lemon tree. And so just to bring the like human beings in their real and loving ways and appreciating them exactly as who they are and having them talk about their passions in life, it was just a really fun experience.
I will insert here that Anne has taught many a yin yoga class and or gentle yoga session in front of that lemon tree for the Mindful Healthcare Collective. And we are so grateful for that.
Yes. And they are just the most beautiful. And so one of the things we talked about in that episode, which I'll just reflect on here, is this idea of fully nourishing yourself with all the senses. And so we often think, okay, I'll go to a yoga class, but doing a yoga class outside in the sunshine with the smell of a lemon tree and a violin or at the retreats on a mountaintop in a sanctuary with all the beautiful light and the sounds of the birds outside and the music and the nourishing bolsters and pillows and her cat and all of the other things, like that's just full spectrum nourishment. And so that episode just makes my heart feel full. Since we're a heart-centered podcast now, that makes my heart feel full. So that's why it's one of my favorites. And we were going to talk about proud. And I think you talked about your story as the one you were most proud of. And for me, that was honestly the hardest one to record. So I'm proud that I did it. And I'm proud that I shared my story. And it's uncomfortable, I think, to share pieces of yourself. And literally, I think the more uncomfortable piece is I don't mind doing it when there's another person right there, but when you're sending it out into the airwaves, which is a little bit different than in a podcast than in another medium, that to me felt really quite edgy. So that was difficult for me. And the other one that I'm most proud of is the loving someone who struggles, because again, it was a very personal story. But more than that, it was really important to me to provide support and help for other people in that situation who I know feel really alone and isolated. And the mission and impact of that one was probably the nearest and dearest to my heart. We wanted to transition to sharing some of the reviews and feedback of the podcast. And we thought we would start with our very first podcast review.
Literally a breath of fresh air. What a great way to start the week and get centered.
A breath of fresh air. Dr. Mahoney and Dr. Liang are experts in the field of mindfulness, thought work, and meditation. I look to them for guidance and can truly say that they have been integral in transforming my life this year. Going from a doctor feeling trapped to flourishing and healing, I am so excited to invite their wisdom into my home through this podcast. Healer, heal thyself.
Thank you. Fantastic way to end the weekend and move into a stressful and busy week. Thank you.
Thank you. Just what I needed to help me take the time to unwind from the day.
What my mind needs. Wish I had learned this long ago. I stumbled upon the Mindful Healthcare Collective on Facebook, then the yoga, then the podcasts, which have tied it all together. At the same time, I am taking a mindfulness-based stress reduction course virtually. What an intentional way to change how I see and walk through life. I can already tell a difference in ability to sleep, as well as connect to both family and patients. I'm excited to be at the beginning of this journey. Thank you so much for offering back to us what you have discovered. May we all learn and grow together.
Mindfulness leaders. Jessie and Ni Chang are both strong voices in the mindfulness world. I love listening to them speak, and they are both such inspirations.
Amazing podcast. These women are wonderful leaders, and their voices and message are needed now more than ever. Thank you for all the great advice. I will continue to share with my colleagues.
Inspiring. Jessie and Ni Chang, thank you for this fruitful, inspiring, loving podcast.
A much needed salve for the soul. Grounding and transformative, insightful, and healing. Thanks for the work that you do.
Incredible, life-changing, just the balance and advice I need in my life.
Compassion. Their podcasts are filled with so much kindness, compassion, and grace. Their message is so needed right now.
Provides clarity. So grateful to learn from these healers. Practicing mindfulness is not easy, but with guidance from Dr. Mahoney and Liang, it makes this practice very natural.
And perhaps my favorite one, the rare chance to pause and breathe. There's one thing this podcast has that so many don't. A pace and tone that themselves relaxes you while you absorb the deep wisdom of its hosts. The opening chime is like a Pavlovian call to calm, a downshift into a lower gear that sits more deeply into your soul. And then this is followed by the thoughtful and personal teachings that are the reliable core of every single episode. These women are worth getting quiet to listen to.
Wow. That was fun. And I have to say, it's beautiful to hear all of that and affirming and inspiring. And it does get that tingle of a little bit of discomfort too, of being appreciated and acknowledged and seen in that way.
Yeah, same. Definitely uncomfortable for me to read, but let's just take a moment and let the words land.
Yeah. I hadn't remembered the one, to me, the fruitful, inspiring, and loving. It's amazing. Insightful and healing. Wow.
Isn't it interesting that as we're reading these glowing reviews that discomfort arises?
Yeah. And fun, but we're practicing.
Yes, it's a process and we're doing it anyway.
Yeah. And we want to encourage all of our listeners to leave us some more reviews. One, so we can practice doing this more because it's a growth area for us. And two, because it helps others find us and helps others know why they might want to listen.
And to make it even more enticing for you to write a positive review, when you do so, you'll get automatically entered into a drawing to win your very own Mindful Healer Singing Bowl.
And that singing bowl, because it's coming from the mindful healers themselves, just might have some mindful healing magic infused into it.
So where are we going from here, Jessie?
So as I thought about this question, it's important to me that we do some work this year to grow our reach, not because the number of downloads means anything specifically, but to get at more of that mindful impact that I mentioned and to help change more lives and help people live more mindfully and intentionally and start to enjoy their one precious and wild life more. The other area of growth and change that I see is intentionally bringing on some more special guests to share some different viewpoints and visions with our listeners and to learn from them ourselves. I would also like to delve into, I haven't told you this, but some more new edgy topics. And just thinking about areas of our lives where mindfulness can pop in and become a part of that we haven't talked about, and maybe some just areas where we can grow and provide sort of new insight and inspiration. And we would love to hear your input on areas that you would like to hear about us on, areas of tension, struggle, where you think new ways or tips and strategies on applying mindfulness and intention would be helpful. And then the last place and area that I would like to grow is to have more fun as we do it and to allow a little bit more of our unique selves to shine through even more, knowing that we are more comfortable using it as a medium. We have a lot of positive feedback, and that I most enjoy when I listen to podcasts, hearing people's individual and unique perspectives. And so that I plan to try to share a little bit more of that and have a little bit more fun while I do so.
For me, I definitely want to give myself permission to let my personality shine through a little bit. Oftentimes I'm very reserved and more introverted, but I also have a fun and playful side that I definitely want to let shine through more. And also to use this podcast as a way to share what's going on in the rest of our work. So, for instance, the in depth offerings that we're going to be sharing about the Mindful Healers Retreat Connecting in Nature that will be happening July of 2022. And then using the podcast as a catalyst to continue to grow and expand the Mindful Healthcare Collective. We're now over 2,300 healthcare professionals strong from all over the world, offering a variety of mindful wellness offerings since April of 2020. And I just did a count, and we are now at 211 sessions. So 211 live online events that we've held for healthcare professionals. And I think that that's amazing.
It's really amazing. And knowing, having been at many of them and hosted many of them, I think they are just these really powerful experiences, kind of like the podcast, but live and in person. And the sense of community that has been built, even though it's virtual and on Zoom, is really magical in my mind. And even when people pop in for yoga and we have the conversations, I feel like I know people all over the country who I've never met. And a beautiful piece for me has been that many of the people who come to our online events have come to my in-person retreats. And I hope that many of you will come to either one of those retreats or this new retreat offering that we're going to offer this summer, the Mindful Healers Retreat. And I'm going to just put the date, save the date. It's July 23rd and 24th. And it's going to be at Green Gulch Farm and Muir Beach near my home in San Francisco. And so please save the date, and the registration will be opening soon. And if you haven't joined us in the Mindful Healthcare Collective, please do. And we would love to meet some of you in person at the Mindful Healers, or first Mindful Healers Retreat.
So excited. And as always, we like to close our episodes with some reflection questions for you. So is celebrating your successes uncomfortable for you? Why or why not?
How can you more intentionally celebrate moments of success and your wins? What does it feel like when you do?
What would it be like if you celebrated with abandon every time there was an opportunity to celebrate?
That sounds so fun. I'm going to try that. And as our 1-year birthday present celebration for the Mindful Healers podcasts, we have a request that you please leave us a written review. And stars help, but the comments actually really make our day. And they help us share the podcast with others that might benefit and enjoy.
So join us live for a celebration tonight, the day that this podcast is released, in the Mindful Healthcare Collective at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Time, January 2nd. We'll leave the link in the show notes. Bring some inspired words and sounds to share with the community. And you can also double your chance of winning that singing bowl.
Infused with magic. So we will give away one to someone who writes a beautiful, inspired review of the podcast that makes us tingle like the ones we shared today in a drawing. And we will give away one to the group that comes to the live celebration. And it just brings back the memory of the very first day we released the podcast. We also did a live celebration with mindful music and mindful sounds. And it was a delightful celebration of community and a chance for people to share their wish lists of what they wanted to hear about in the podcast. And we would love to meet you there and hear from you in person.
Hope to see you soon. And as always, thanks so much for listening. If it's safe to do so, we invite you to stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment.
As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or up-level your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely. Welcome to the mindful moment. This mindful moment is going to be called relishing in the celebration. So inviting you to close eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you and placing both hands atop your heart, bringing to mind a situation that you would like to celebrate, however big or small, a win, a success for you. And letting that situation kind of come into the forefront of your awareness. Noticing the sounds, the sights, maybe even the smells of that particular situation, so that it might conjure up a more vivid memory of that win or success. And then tapping into your present moment experience now. What are your body sensations right now as I invite you to conjure up a win or success? Could taking this mindful moment be, in its own way, a form of celebration? So noticing body sensations, and then next shifting to emotions. What emotions arise for you as I ask you to remember a win or a success? And then next, inviting you to notice the thoughts that you might be having about this exercise. Is it uncomfortable for you? Is there some judgment that arises? And are you able to notice those thoughts and still at the same time give yourself permission to relish in the success and the win, and perhaps the happiness or joy that it may or may not bring? And then next, inviting you to think about what might happen if you shared that success or win with someone else, a loved one. And perhaps making a pledge to yourself to do that, to share that success or win with someone else. And as you're ready, letting your hands rest in your lap, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in, taking a moment now to notice how you feel. And I invite you to share your win or your success with a loved one. Thanks so much for joining us for this mindful moment offering.